compliance with it. Okay. Committee will come to order with just a 5-member committee. I don't think we need to bother to take roll. It's pretty obvious who's here and who isn't. Let me, and I apologize, I was unable to attend on the first meeting because I had a quick little bug or whatever it was. Let me say just a few words about some ways I run this committee. I do not like to reach a final decision on a bill with less than a majority of the committee. So if we get a 2-to-1 vote in here, either way, we'll hold it open until we've heard from enough members so that we have 3 votes in whatever the final decision is. And I think that's only reasonable because we will get called away for other things in the nature of this place. And I hate to see a bill go up or down based on who happened to be here. So that's one thing. Second thing, committee members, I do tend to try to run a fast meeting, so don't hesitate to slow things down and ask questions. I figure there is no such thing as a dumb question. And this is the place to get those settled. For the audience, and I'll probably have to repeat this several times, I will do some things. We'll hear from the bill sponsor first, or whoever's caused the bill sponsor to bring it. And we will hear from the state agencies, providing I recognize them. And I don't always. And then I will call for volunteers as to who wants to testify. And speak up, be prepared to speak up. And I am also willing on occasion to call on somebody who has not volunteered, if I think they really have something to offer. So with that brief introduction, first bill for our consideration is Senate File 47, the repeal of immunity for corporal discipline. Senator Beitman, this was basically your bill in the interim committee. You were the one that pushed it, and I believe you have an expert here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. And if you don't mind, may I call on Mr. Jones to explain the bill for us? And Mr. Jones, come on up.
Okay, Mr. Jones, introduce yourself and who you are, who you work for the record. If it has a green light, it's on.
There you go. Thank you.
And it can be stubborn about coming on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my honor to speak to you today. Out of respect for your time, I've condensed my comments into just a couple minutes. My name is Jeff Jones, and I'm fortunate to be in my 30th year as a professional educator. I've served as a teacher, a school counselor, and school principal. I'm currently the principal at Tongue River Middle School in Ranchester, Wyoming, and this is my 15th year as a principal. In May of 2021, I completed my doctoral dissertation entitled An Analysis of Wyoming Public School Administrators' Perceptions on the Use of Corporal Punishment in Wyoming Public Schools. A bit of background: Wyoming schools have reported 0 incidents of corporal punishment to the Office of Civil Rights since 2012. Also, prior to my study, I found that 22 of the 48 school districts prohibited its use, 16 didn't mention it at all in policy, and 10 permitted its use as per board policy. After this study, and after personally contacting the school board members and the superintendents of the 10 schools, still allowing it as per board policy, as of this morning, 7 of the 10 have since changed their policy to no longer allow corporal punishment. That leaves 3 school districts out of 48 that still allow corporal punishment as per board policy. I've checked, before I make a presentation on this information, I've checked every time prior to my presentation, and sometimes those numbers have changed a little bit because they're removed from policy, so I can't see them, and then also put back. But as of this morning, 3 out of 48. Of those 3, I spoke to one of the superintendents in that district, and he was shocked to know that it was in his board policy. One of the other schools of the 3, I received an email from the board chairman just a couple weeks ago letting me know that it was her recommendation to move the policy to review. For my study, I surveyed every Wyoming public school administrator that would be in a position to deliver school-level discipline. To the item, I believe corporal punishment should remain legal in Wyoming's public schools. Nearly 90% of the administrators either disagreed or strongly disagreed. Also, when asked, would they accept a job where they were expected to administer corporal punishment, the administrators were nearly unanimous in responding no. In the distant past, when bills were brought before the Wyoming legislature seeking to end the legal protection of corporal punishment, the bills have died. The reasons given according to interviews with legislators at the time were that corporal punishment is not being used in Wyoming public schools, so there is no need for a bill. I believe that's flawed justification for inaction. Ask yourself, what if corporal punishment was being used in today's society in our Wyoming public schools? I would argue there would be backlash, and it would be significant. And ironically, it would probably make passage of this kind of legislation even easier. I'll close with this. The research on the ineffectiveness of corporal punishment is staggering at this point. When I contacted the 10 districts still allowing it in policy, the responses from the superintendents were similar. They had no idea it was still in policy. With 45 of the 48 districts not allowing it, and noting that there has been 0 incidents reported in over a decade, that's not by accident. We know better. And also the Wyoming School Board Association recently in their convention voted to support a resolution to support the repeal of the legal protection for corporal punishment. All of this combined is evidence to me there's no longer a place for Wyoming public schools to support corporal punishment. If you'd like to know more about the results of this study, I have an executive summary that I'll hand out to you. As a former classroom teacher, I purposely didn't hand it out to you while I was speaking, but I'd be happy to hand it out to you, and it has a lot more details. And also I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have. So I don't know the protocol here if that we get, thank you very much.
Do you have enough copies? She's got one for the record.
I have plenty copies here.
Okay. Really, one thing we are going in session 9:30 and we'll leave a few minutes to get up there and get ready. If we will get done with anything else today, we're simply going to carry on. We are getting up. It is critical. So we want to abbreviate your comments or your questions over that today. Okay, any questions from Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for making the trip all the way down. And I know the roads are closed, so you're going to be here for a while anyway, so welcome to Cheyenne, so you can get home. I hear a lot, I guess the only argument against the bill idea that I've heard is, what about a fight? What if we have to break up a fight and we're going to remove this immunity from liability, and innocent people are going to get caught up in this? Can you address that issue? Because I guarantee you that'll be brought up at some point, either today or on the floor.
Absolutely. I think my response would be in two parts. First, I think it's important to understand the definition of corporal punishment. You can find different definitions depending on what research journal you're looking at. The one that I think encompasses most every definition I've come across is this. It's defined as using physical force with the intention of causing pain to correct misbehavior. So again, causing physical force with the intention of causing pain to correct misbehavior. So if that is the definition, then the situation, Mr. Chairman and Senator Biden, the situation of trying to break up a fight or ending up in a situation that could become physical, I would assume that if you are defending yourself from being attacked or defending a child from who has no defense, and you're taking the necessary steps to keep people safe and nothing beyond that, I would imagine that you would be protected by law. I know a huge portion of our educators, especially those serving in special education and also administrators, for this very reason are trained to handle crisis situations. I'm in that group. I've been trained in Crisis Prevention Institute, where you're allowed to intervene to keep people safe, but in no way do you become the aggressor. And in any situation where you're intervening in a violent situation, I would imagine that the law would protect you as long as you are trying to reduce the violence instead of being on the aggressive side of the situation.
Let me follow up on that. Is there a statutory definition of corporal punishment anywhere that you know of?
I've looked at the statute in Wyoming, and I have a copy of it. It would take me a minute to find it, but the current statute that we have does not specifically get into details. It only references that how it is to be defined would be up to the individual school boards of the 48 school districts. So I could pull up the actual statute. I have it in my stack here, but that would be something that we'd have to go back and look at. I do know that along those lines, Mr. Chairman, one of the most recent news articles that I could find from the Wyoming legislature when this was tried in the past was from 2003. I couldn't find anything more recent than that. And in that article, it was noted that the bill at that time, which did not survive, it was two-pronged. One, it did not allow for the use of corporal punishment, but then the second part of it was that it also tried to give immunity to those in violent situations that were trying to protect students or staff. And so I'm not so sure, frankly, that, in my opinion, that part is necessary. For me, I think it's more a matter of the use of corporal punishment as a discipline should not be protected by Wyoming statute.
Do we have a copy of the statutes committee room? We'll need one. The statute we're repealing with this bill has an A and a B, and this bill merely repeals number B. A said each board of trustees in each school district may adopt rules for reasonable forms of punishment and disciplinary measures Subject to such rules, teachers, principals, and superintendents in district may impose reasonable forms of punishment and discipline measures for insubordination, disobedience, or other misconduct. B says that this bill would repeal. It says teachers, principals, and superintendents in each district shall be immune from civil or criminal liability in the exercise of reasonable corporal discipline of a student as authorized by board policy. So what we're really repealing is the immunity that keeps them from having to answer in court for reasonable discipline. There is a subsection C, which has to do with diplomas or credit for a course. And I think excludes that. So I don't see a definition of corporal punishment either. It's left to the districts.
Mr. Chairman, may I interject? One of the questions I think I have along those lines is, what's the difference between not being legally protected and being prohibited in statute? You know, I don't know the answer to that.
If it's prohibited in statute, clearly you cannot do it. And you would be, I think, in real legal jeopardy if you did.
Right.
If the statute is silent, then you'd have a matter, was it abusive or improper, or something like that, violated board policy.
Right.
The statutory protection is what we're repealing. And in a circumstance, the concern I heard from an individual who lobbies on different things, but had children in the school, was that if force was used in a situation of a fight or somebody that was totally disruptive, that there might be some risk that the courts would interpret that as corporal punishment. And what I hear you saying is that has not proved to be a problem, because most of the districts had been rid of this for more than 10 years now. And it's now down to just 3 that allow it, and they don't do it. So we're not seeing unintended consequences by the board policy, which is allowed to define things, saying we aren't going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm thinking that that was an alarmist view, and that there isn't an unintended consequence to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I might say, I think you have to come back to the definition of corporal punishment. We're talking about punishment. If we're intervening in a fight, that's not the time for punishment. We're intervening to keep people safe. And so if we're looking about corporal punishment, it's an intentional act to reduce inappropriate behavior in the future. So it's a consequence as a result of behavior that a student has demonstrated. That's corporal punishment. Intervening in a fight to keep people safe is not a punishment. That's an precautionary behavior that you take to keep people safe.
The same would apply if you had a student that was just out of control in a classroom.
Absolutely.
You had to have some restraint so he didn't hurt himself or somebody else until the proper
Absolutely.
help could arrive.
And Mr. Chairman, all of these ways that we're trained to reduce conflict, particularly violence, in every training, the goal of the training is to not be an aggressor, to reduce conflict, to not take physical steps unless you absolutely have to. I've been doing this for 30 years, And my track as a professional just happens to be, in large part, dealing with the most difficult students in the school. That's been my path as a teacher, a counselor, a principal. I have learned over and over again that time is your best advocate. Time is your best advocate. And so you are trained to reduce the likelihood of an escalation. And that's a part of what we do in our schools nowadays. And to divert from that and become the physical aggressor, first of all, would not be protected legally because you would be out of bounds. That would be inappropriate. But I also don't feel like that doesn't fit the definition of corporal punishment. That's a completely different scenario than what we're talking about with corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is very planned. When you look at school board policy, it's very outlined. This is the way it will happen, and these are the steps to be followed. I've looked at lots and lots of different board policies, especially in the South and the Southwest, where 90% of the incidents of corporal punishment are recorded, and it's very intentional. It's not as a result of a crisis event happening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is the State Department of Education here? Am I seeing them correctly? Do you want to say anything on the subject? Okay. Who else wants to testify on this? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Clark Fairbanks. I am with Wyoming Youth Service Association, nonprofit youth service agencies across Wyoming. And I come before you just to stand in support of the prohibition of corporal punishment. In my 30 years of work in youth services, children who may be subject to corporal punishment often come from hard places, often with special needs, and often have not lacked consequences. What they lack are the skills to self-regulate, and I believe it's the education responsibility to teach those skills in a safe, nurturing, and compassionate environment. So as you notice, I'm keying in not so much on the liability, but on, I believe it's time for Wyoming statutorily to prevent corporal punishment in public and private schools. And I would stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've been grappling with this as we talk about this, so maybe I should have asked the first witness this, but I'll ask you. Our statute does not say punishment, it says discipline. And so there is a clear difference between punishment and discipline. Do you see that, and could you explain the difference and why we're referring to this as punishment rather than discipline?
I don't, Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, I don't have the definitions from in front of me. I believe they are often used synonymously, and so I would correct my statement to say discipline, corporal discipline. And I think that's a fair clarification.
Let me ask you one. This bill, what it does is repeal the statutory protection for somebody getting sued for administering a corporal punishment. But it does not forbid, positively forbid, the practice. It looks like, as a practical matter, virtually all school districts have gotten rid of it out of their board policies, and the ones that still have it aren't using it. So you have how do you stand on this bill, which is not a prohibition of corporal punishment, but will probably remove the last vestiges of it from any likely practice in the state, in the schools.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I think that's consistent with my testimony, is to remove it from the practice.
You don't think we need to go the further step of prohibiting it, that's unnecessary if this stops its practice?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Anybody else? Anybody else? School Boards Association or WEA, does either one of you want to say anything about this bill? Okay. Senator Beitman, you have anything to add?
Well, is there anybody on Zoom before I move the bill, or
What?
is there anybody on Zoom before I move the bill, or?
We have not encouraged Zoom.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then, Mr. Chairman, I will move the bill, please. Do pass.
Motion is, on the bill is due pass. We do not require seconds in this committee. I've frankly felt no need for that with a 5-member committee. Committee, anything else? Further comments, questions for anybody?
Mr. Chairman, just to bring it home, you pretty much nailed it. What we're doing here is repealing the last vestiges of this from the books, this liability protection. I guess theoretically, if there is one of these 3 holdout districts that still has it on the books, if this bill were to pass, the consequences would be such that, okay, these 3 districts are now open to civil and criminal consequences for their actions if they do use corporal discipline and the parent feels it was not appropriate and their kid comes home with bruises and they want to know why, then they can take legal action against the school district. So that's ultimately, Mr. Chairman, all this bill does. I think I applaud the bringer of the bill for pointing this out to the committee and urge its passage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will say it does show the tremendous change that has been in society. When I was in 8th grade, I used to walk to class past the junior high office, 7th and 8th grade. And there was always a lineup of kids waiting for their swats. Quincy Tartar, the principal. That practice sounds like it is long dead at this point. I must say it was a shock to me when I first came in the legislature. Both my principal and my 8th grade history teacher were members down here, and adjusting to them as colleagues as opposed to, august, distant figures was different. But it does show how much the society has changed. It just doesn't prove it anymore. Okay. Anything else? You ready for the question of the bill? Okay, the motion is due pass. There are no amendments. Call the roll, please.
Senator Beitman? Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss?
He left a proxy for an aye vote.
Senator Steinmetz?
Aye.
Chairman Scott?
Aye. 5 ayes. I imagine we'll see it fairly rapidly upstairs. Okay, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 51. The School Finance Regional Cost Adjustment. My understanding of this is that the reason we did it in the Joint Interim Committee was the adjustment that's in here, which you can see back in the bill, enables us to really increase the reimbursement for counties that have, should we say, very high real estate prices and very high wages in consequence, because they're very attractive places to live. And that is the practical effect of the bill. The fiscal note shows an increase in expenditures of approximately 400,000 a year, looking at the FY 2025 figures. And I don't fully understand that fiscal note, so it would be useful if the State Department of Education could explain it. So unless I see somebody else, I want to get the State Department of Education to come forward and explain how this fits into our school funding system and what the practical effect of this bill is.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Leslie Zimmerscheid, supervisor at the School Foundation Program over at WDE.
And give me your name again, I had trouble understanding it.
My name is Leslie Zimmerscheid.
Good morning, Chairman Scott. My name is Wanda Maloney. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the Department of Education.
Okay. Go ahead and proceed.
Mr. Chairman, this bill would increase expenditures from the School Foundation program account, because it would provide an adjustment through the RCA to school districts that have high inflationary pressures.
Okay, take us through the mechanics, and you've got a couple of members here that are new to the committee, and the rest of us probably don't qualify as experts on this. We want to see the mechanics of how this fits into the school funding system.
So, Mr. Chairman, the funding model contains one component that is a regional cost adjustment, and it is based on location, based on county. It is currently based upon the Wyoming Cost of Living Index, spread out over several years, averaged together, and applied to each county. This bill would change that adjustment to allow for the greater of that average or the most recent WCLI, Wyoming Cost of Living Index number, to be applied at the district level.
So, let me see if I'm understanding correctly. We have a regional cost adjustment. And as it stands now, it's the average of what, 3 years?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Mr. Chairman, the WCLI is published twice per year, and so it is the average of 3 years or 6 of those reports.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Zimmerscheid, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So the current method, this rolling, what is it, 3-year average, is that the average statewide, or is this broken down district by district currently?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Beitman, it is at the county level,
Okay, county level.
and then we apply it to each district within the county. There is one exception, and that is Lincoln County is divided into two. The north and the south are calculated separately.
And follow up? So the only change would be then to offer them, if there was a current spike in inflation in the most recent year, that would, you could choose between the two, or would it automatically pick the higher number?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Beitman, the funding model formula would give them the higher number. There would not be a choice. It would just be applied automatically.
Okay, thank you.
This bill says the district, and I guess you can see the language at the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4. District gets so it gets the highest of the most recent.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the funding model uses either, and it's applied automatically, it uses either the 6 reports averaged or the hedonic wage index, which has been set since 2005, or this bill would allow for a third option, which would be just the most recent WCLI. So the model would automatically apply the highest
So
of
the
those.
model would look at the 3 different results. Which is Wyoming cost of living, hedonic. And can you explain for the benefit of everybody here, especially the new members, what you mean by hedonic wage index?
Mr. Chairman, the hedonic wage index is a different indicator of inflationary pressure that was chosen by the legislature and calculated by the legislature's consultants in 2005. Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Why has that not been done for those of us who were not on the committee during that period? Which was all of us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure it was a legislative decision.
Senator Biden.
Another question. So absent this bill, if we did currently, obviously, we're currently going through a high inflationary period, a spike. If this bill were not in statute, if the school districts or school system needed a bump, they would have to come to the legislature and ask for an appropriation, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, right now, we just use the average of the 3 or the hedonic wage index, the average of the 3 years, 6 reports, or the hedonic wage index, and it's just part of the model. There are no other adjustments to the RCA. There are other components that are reviewed annually, but otherwise, there are no inflationary adjustments that are automatically applied.
Okay, thank you.
And I would think we would have great difficulty with a special appropriation for one or two school districts. I don't know how that would fit into so-called cost-based model. This is an attempt to get some relief from the high inflation pressure. Senator Steinmetz, you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered how this interplays with the ECA. I realize it's regional, but is there, being new to the committee, please educate me as to if there's any interplay with the ECA. Does that take those kinds of pressures into its calculations at all?
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Steinmetz, the ECA and the RCA are two different components that are applied separately to the model. They don't interact with each other than they are both applied to salaries within the model. The ECA contains more components and can be applied to utilities and to energy costs, the utilities, supplies and materials, and to staffing. The RCA is only applied to staffing. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, okay, and if you don't follow up, I will.
All right. Well, the other interplay and you might have a different follow-up than me, Mr. Chairman, thank you, is what is the interplay between the recapture districts and the inflationary pressures? Are these recapture districts? Are they, I'm not sure what the appropriate word is, hardship districts for the use of a better word, or how does that play? Are these the richer districts that would see this applied to them? How does that interplay?
So, Mr. Chairman and Senator Steinmetz, this particular bill, it directly impacts two districts who are both recapture districts. And this calculation would allow for more revenue to stay with the district and less revenue to be recaptured by the state.
Okay, and let me explain just a little further. When you read the Campbell Court decisions, one thing they very clearly do is say that the wealth of the district is not to influence, wealth or lack of it is not to influence how much spending there is on the schools. That they're trying to make our formula entirely independent of the wealth of the district, and the recapture districts naturally are the wealthy ones. These two are unusual in they're the two where it's the price of homes and businesses. The values have gone through the roof because of their desirability in the eyes of enough people to make the homes very expensive up there. The question I would have is the regional cost adjustment is applied as a percentage of the wages. Is that right?
Chairman Scott, yes, that's correct.
And this will boost the allowance for the wages in those two districts. So the regional, they get both the benefit of the regional cost adjustment and the ECA, is that right?
Chairman Scott, yes, both would still apply.
So what we've got is the ECA, the external cost adjustment is what that stands for, that we will vote on separately because this committee recommends, and then the Appropriations Committee brings it to the full legislature. And they have a version of what they think we ought to do. So whatever we do there will affect this county, and then this would affect them even more because we're basically saying that the formula is out of whack and we've got two counties where you need to pay more in order to do a decent job of attracting the teachers and enabling to live there and take that job. But I am right that they get the effect of both the external cost adjustment and this. There's some special things going on in those two counties. And frankly, this was the simple way we found to deal with that problem, which we think is a problem. Department, any further comments? Committee, any further questions for the department and how the formula works? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else here present? Teton County's going to talk to us. Welcome. State your name for the record. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Janine Bayteski from Teton County. This is kind of a complex issue. And it was sort of interesting. I was sitting in appropriations back in December, and I was listening to, I think it was December, November, listening to the Craig report. And the very things that we're happy to see, which is increased revenues, indeed are causing the hardships in our district. And what do I mean by that? Is to take your comment, Senator Steinmetz, is Teton County at the present time is sending back over $50 million in recapture dollars from residential and commercial property taxes. Personally, my taxes went up 90% last year. So consequently, what we're seeing is our teachers can't afford to live there. And so Senator Dockstader and I guess Speaker Summers have been working on this, which is, the process that's being outlined here is exactly the same process we use for enrollment to calculate ADM. And this huge spike is killing us. We took $2.5 million out of our $8.5 million reserve account to front load regional cost of living in order to be able to retain teachers. We had 60 resignations, not retirements, but resignations of people who could no longer put up with and afford to live in Teton County. Now, to go back and clarify your question on the difference between the ECA and the RCA, they do in fact sort of partner together. And there's 4 components of the external cost adjustment. There's materials, there's professional staff, non-professional staff, and then utilities. So, based on the fact that 2 of those categories are indeed staffing categories, the regional cost only pays into the salary portion of the block grant. And so, we would just really encourage, and, if inflation quits going like this and comes back down, then we'll see a change in the WCLI. We'll see a change in those, the spike in our housing cost. And the question that was asked about the hedonic wage index, yes, it was established in 2005. It has certainly been a decision because I guess there's really no agency within the state government that really would work on the hedonic wage index. There are certainly components within that index that could have been updated along the way, like free and reduced lunch counts. There's a small sliver in there of the WCLI, but it was just a choice that has been made to not update that index. So I stand for any questions you may have, and I certainly encourage you to please help us out here.
so, and am I right in understanding you're on the school board in Teton County still? Is that correct?
Chairman Scott, my 20 years ended in December,
So you're no longer a school board member?
but I'm very passionate about this issue and I'm here.
Okay. Any further questions? Understand that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you again. I'm just wondering if this is a little bit of a drop in the bucket because it is a broader problem that you're having with housing in Teton County. And so tell me what impact you really think this will have in the scope of things, because we've even heard about issues of, low-income housing being constructed on some of the fairground property and all of those types of issues. So what real impact do you see this having? And then, because it's a change in statute, it's a change in the formula, I'm glad you brought up the ADM, because I saw that as exactly similar. And then we're building in an escalator again into the model that then we probably won't look at again. And so, as you know, on appropriations, we're working on taking those escalators out. So the fact that you brought that up, I'd like you to address how much of an impact you think this might have, and why we would need to put a long-term escalator in the model.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Steinmetz. I don't look at this as an escalator. And the reason I don't is that if indeed, to take your point on housing, and if I can just back up a second. So just in November, there was $160 million worth of items on our ballot for SPET, Special Purpose Excise Tax. $80 million of that would go to different housing projects. Of that 80 million, Teton County School District got 16 million. So we will be building, I think, 25 housing units. As rents go down, our regional cost of living will adjust downward as well. So it's hard for me to say, yes, at the present time, it's certainly an escalator. But if indeed all of the affordable housing options and the housing programs that are coming forward really come to fruition, we will see a decrease in our regional cost of living adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and I understand that part. However, I see with ADM the fact that when you have a choice of 3 options and the model will automatically give you the highest, the chances of that being an escalator might be relative to that. So wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't, honestly. I apologize, but I can't agree on that. Thank you.
My understanding here is this is a change to the model. The model gets redone theoretically every 5 years, and I think we're scheduled in 2025. The last attempt to redo the model, failed. The House and Senate were unable to come to an agreement on the recalibration committee. The House proposed its own bill, Senate proposed its own bill, you may recall that. And what happened was, I think it was either the day that the Senate passed its bill, or the day before, the day after, the feds came in with a massive stimulus bill with very complicated maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity requirements. And it took us 6 months to figure out what those meant, if we figured it out correctly. And that essentially messed up both bills, and we were unable to reach an agreement in the conference committee. But with the federal changes, we simply didn't know what we were doing. And so we will need to get a successful review in 2025. So I would view a change that we're making here as an attempt to tide us over until 2025, when we can take a careful look at the whole system. Because these counties have continually been outliers and a problem because of their local circumstances. It's a profitable problem for the state, but we do have to make some allowances here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, and I'm really glad you brought up the stimulus money, because, you know, you have to reflect on how that money was distributed. And it was distributed based on Title I counts, or free and reduced lunch counts. Teton County did not have a very high free and reduced lunch count for several reasons, some of which I will not go into here. And consequently, you know, we had to go into our reserves. We didn't have stimulus money to be able to bail us out and to be able to put that money into salaries. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, but it sure fouled up our ability to do anything. Because frankly, we didn't understand the distribution system. It's, as a practical matter, we didn't understand particularly the maintenance of equity requirement and the maintenance of effort requirement. That was not the big problem, but the maintenance of equity was. So the feds did a pretty thorough job of messing us up. And so this comes to us basically as a stopgap, trying to deal with a real problem. Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else want to testify?
I guess, Mr. Chair, just to close out, the other comment that I'd like to make is you can see that the housing issue that we're suffering in Teton County is, we're willing to share it. So we've been sharing it down into Lincoln County. We're going to be sharing it down into Sublette County. So, you know, that whole side of the state is really being impacted by this issue. So I thank you for your time today.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Mr. Takaria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Ken DeCaria. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Wyoming School Boards Association. And Mr. Chairman, this particular bill, we're in support because it provides more immediate relief for districts that are growing. And Mr. Chairman, just as a point of clarification, because it's come up, the external cost adjustment it's to adjust for inflation, and that is an adjustment that is statewide. And as Ms. Teskey said, it was because of those 4 areas. And so that adjustment would be a statewide adjustment for those costs. And the Supreme Court said that that had to be done at least once every 2 years, so you didn't come out of the cost basis on the model. The regional cost adjustment addresses the fact that some areas of the state are just more expensive to live in than other areas of the state. And so this is only about the regional cost adjustment. And we know there are areas of the state that it costs quite a bit more to live in than other areas. And so this is just, the regional cost is an adjustment to address those issues, because quite frankly, you know, I don't think Teton County could hire teachers at the rate that, you know, they get paid in a lot of other places in the state of Wyoming. And so this particular bill, what it would do is just make it more immediate as far as that adjustment. Instead of doing the average of 6, you know, just the most recent one, so that would allow them the flexibility to adjust more quickly to this increase in costs. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Anybody else? Anybody else? WA, you sure you don't want to say something about this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. We are here in support of this bill. You all had taken up the important topic of teacher retention and attraction. And in this particular instance, this is a component that helps those areas that are hard hit with inflation. So we are in support of this bill. I stand for questions.
Okay. Questions for the day? You know, there was testimony that 60 people had resigned from the Teton County School District in the past year. Do you know how many of those were teachers, and do you know it's 60 out of how many?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have those numbers. I do not know that answer.
Ms. Teskey, is she still here? She stepped out, okay. We'll need to find that out. Anybody else want to testify? Any further questions here? No, seeing none, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? State Department of Education, do you know how many employees Teton School District has overall? Sorry, Chairman Scott, we do not have that information. Okay, I would appreciate having that. Okay, nobody else wants to testify. Committee. It's an interim committee bill. Back to the committee. Any amendments, any further comments? Senator Office, are you comfortable with this bill coming in later?
Mr. Chairman, I am, unless something dramatically changed from the interim. I remember all of the discussion and debate, but it seems like you were here for a little while.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything that I should be backfilled in on, but. Entirely. All right. So that is a bit of a change.
That's unfair harassment.
That's a bit of a change. But yes, I certainly recall the discussion and debate from the interim.
Okay. Okay. Senator Steinmetz.
Mr. Chairman, as we're on discussion on the bill, out of deference to the committee and the work that you've done, I will vote this out onto the floor. I'll vote aye to get it onto the floor, but I can't guarantee my vote on the floor.
Okay, so we may have some fun with the Appropriations Committee on the floor, is how I take that. Any further discussion?
Well, I'll move it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I do now hear a motion.
Yep.
without having to ask for it. The motion is due pass. We have not amended it. Does anybody want to amend?
May I just make a general comment, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly, Senator Buckman.
Thank you. Now that it's been moved and it's on the table, boy, I struggle with this just like Senator Steinmetz does. My thoughts are the model either works or it doesn't. And that the model was designed by these supposedly the smartest guys in the room, paid them a lot of money to get this right. They get to pick from the higher of everything every time. So they're always coming out with the best possible result, but there's nothing for the back end. So if inflation were to go down, you've got to go through it's got to be down for 3 years plus in order for the amount of money to actually go down. So it's always almost going to go up. And so what we're doing with this bill is we're, like Senator Steinmetz said, this is another escalator that we're putting into the model. It's not a lot of money. According to the fiscal note, it's what, $400,000 out of a $1 billion+ biennial budget. So it is a drop in the bucket. I don't know how much it really helps, but it does. Once it's in there, I'm afraid it's going to stay in there. Even though we do go to recalibration in 2025, chances of this coming out are probably pretty slim. So I think it always helps on the going up side, but there's no relief for the taxpayers on the downside. So with that, I'm probably going to be a no on this, Mr. Chairman. I just don't think, as a policy, I think we should trust the model. The model's supposed to work. And another point I want to make also is, if we want to go to the most recent report, I'm cool with that. Let's get rid of the 3-year average then. You know, let's just go with the most recent, because that will cover the spikes in inflation and it'll cover the drops in inflation, and then it'll be more volatile, but it's kind of a compromise because it gives you that, if inflation does spike, you benefit from a higher appropriation. If it drops, the appropriation follows. But having either the choice of the 3-year rolling average, or if the most recent report's higher, then you get the higher amount. I don't think that's good policy. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm probably a no. Thanks.
Your office.
And my apologies if I'm reiterating something that's already been said, since I wasn't present for the benefit of the debate. But with regard to the model, the RCA, during each recalibration, we've received updates on what the RCA should look like, but we haven't adopted them. So the RCA certainly is not something that you would point to and say that it is the recommendation of the consultants. It is a feature of the Wyoming legislature and the Wyoming legislature alone. We made some interesting choices before I was in the legislature that established the way that the RCA would be calculated. It is technically constitutionally compliant with what the Supreme Court asked for, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was an incredible solution. The challenge over the last decade plus is that an appropriate change to reflect the recommendations from the consultants has always cost between $15 and $35 million to implement. And that's the reason why we have what is effectively a flawed model, is the desire not to increase the amount that was going towards the overall school foundation program budget. So yeah, there are flaws, there's no question, and I certainly agree with Senator Beitman that if this gets put in, it's unlikely to be stripped out. I don't disagree with that. And I wouldn't even say that's a component of the, really the recalibration would be more to look at which factors are used, not this based on anything we did in the past. So I think that's an appropriate assumption. I'll support the legislation because we have heard of concerns from a couple of our growing communities in western part of the state in particular, that the 3-year average is slow to keep up. And I think it's our obligation to actually be reflective. It is constitutional to do, in my view, what Senator Beitman and Senator Steinmetz advocated for, which would be to have as close to an instantaneous as possible. I think that is a legitimate solution. The challenge there is the rapid hiring and firing of personnel is the outcome of that. Hiring is generally takes a bit of a timeline to then fire and rehire, has an associated cost. That's at least the philosophy behind the 3-year tail, is if you're being volatile, it might not be in your interest to immediately defund personnel. If there were more slush or something, I mean, if you had savings, whatever, if there were a way to curb the volatility otherwise, I think it would be just fine. I don't know what that is though. So.
It seems to me, Senator Brennan, did you want to say something? Okay, go ahead.
I guess I would agree. I understand needing to keep up with the cost of living for our teachers, but I am concerned that maybe we're putting a Band-Aid with long-term unintended consequences on a problem that needs a better solution.
I think I would have some sympathy for that concern. I do think as a practical matter, we've got a problem in those counties and we well know it. What I'm going to suggest is that what we ought to do is put in a sunset clause. So it doesn't carry over long-term. And I think that would enable us to solve the immediate problem, put some pressure on the next recalibration to take a harder look at this problem and see if there's a better solution. This is the Band-Aid we can come up with in a hurry. That would enable us to solve the immediate problem without having the long-term consequence. So we're fortunate this has come up early in the session. I don't want to work that solution on the fly here. I'm going to lay this bill back until Monday. Bring a sunset date on this provision, that would sunset in the date where if we do an external cost adjustment on schedule, it would take effect. So it'll carry us until then, and see if that won't improve the bill to where I think we've got a better chance of passing it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just say it's a really good idea. It's a good approach. And in fact, I think at that point, and I think it's still within the title, scrap the changes to statute entirely and do a non-codified time period notwithstanding so that it cancels itself.
Let me consult with
Yeah.
the LSO attorneys is the best
Yep.
way to do that. Because this is in that attachment A as opposed to the green books, I think you get some complications.
Mr. Chairman, this is in the Green Books.
This is in the. green
Yeah, and that's why I think it would be better to not mess with the Green Books and just do a non-codified.
That's
Yeah.
one of the options we'll
Yep.
look at.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, one other thing, just about the Band-Aid comment, it definitely is. Everything we've done in RCA for as long as I've been in the legislature has just been a Band-Aid on a problem, followed by a further Band-Aid on a problem, because we have let that compound to the point where it's so costly to solve the problem that we just keep throwing Band-Aids at it.
Yeah, and part of the problem there is that we're seeing in the districts across the state broadly that we've overfunded this thing, and that the expense of the education has gotten out of hand without comparable increases in the quality. So that complicates it, but these districts have a real problem. So, okay, I will seek out the LSO attorneys and get something drawn up. And we might even look at 2 different ways of doing it. Okay, with that, this will be first bill on Monday, and we'll have some other bills as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I was thinking exactly the same thing, sorry. I was trying to figure out how to put a sunset in and wasn't quite sure how to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it would be a challenge to actually put one in this bill.
Because it's existing statute and, yeah. I
yeah.
agree with you, that's why it was kind of up or down, right?
Yeah, yeah, a quick non-codified takes care of that.
Scott, I have those numbers for you.
Ah,